It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and welcome to the penultimate weekend of 2004. Christmas weekend. We got 5 big movies to look at today, a lot of films to take a look at, so let's not waste any more time, just jump on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, the sequel to Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers. Because first movie, I mean, everything that you saw in there was pretty much the first movie again. And, yeah, it's basically a comedy sequel, and they got it on the right time. I mean, they got it right just a little bit over the criteria that I usually like to have with comedy sequels. Like, between 2 to 4 years, I think, is that when you get the best comedy sequels overall. This barely goes over it, but it's about 4 years, and I wouldn't even say this is really the best in general, but as you see there, having managed to enter the long-form circle of trust after the events of Meet the Parents, Greg Focker, played by Ben Stiller, invites the straight-laced Burns family to meet Mom and Dad, played by Dustin Hoffman and Barbara Streisand, the eccentric Fockers. However, his conservative Jack and Dina, once again played by Robert De Niro and Blythe Danner, finally get to meet the uninhibited cool parents, Bernie and Roz. Rivalries and secrets emerge, and someone learns a new word. But there's still something fishy about Greg. Will Jack resort to his using his infallible contraptions to get to the bottom of Greg's suspicious behavior? Did I already say before that this was a comedy sequel? I think you can pretty much tell exactly what's going to happen here. And yeah, everything you expect to happen in here is pretty much that. It was a movie that's pretty much the same movie as the last time around, but it was a massive hit when it came out. It was a movie that I don't think anybody really expected to be as big of a hit as it was. I mean, it did have the benefit of coming out on Christmas weekend. You know, families are going to the movies after the holidays. There's nothing really coming out between Christmas and New Year's, so there's plenty to choose from. And this was one of the big ones, and this was actually the highest-grossing film Robert De Niro starred in before Joker came out in 2019. And yeah, it made almost double what the original film did. I mean, it's a film that honestly, like, it's a movie that has a lot of fans to it. It was a big hit, and it was essentially the film that had made this into a trilogy because we would get Little Fockers at the end of the year. I would say we will probably regret that, but we'll climb that ladder when we have to. But I say that this is a bad movie. I say it like it's a bad movie, but it's really not. It's just a movie that suffers from sequelitis. I mean, it really does feel like a film that we've seen done to death, and yeah, the film isn't bad in particular. I do like Dustin Hoffman and Barbara Streisand coming into the film as Greg's parents. I think they are a nice contrast to Robert De Niro and Blythe Danner's characters. Ben Stiller, I think, is still very funny. I do like that we get to meet a lot of the Fockers in here. There are parts in here that I do really not like. I don't like the subplot where, you know, Alana Eubank plays the former housekeeper of Greg when you know, apparently he and she had an affair together, and they supposedly have a kid together, and that subplot really does not go anywhere in general, and it just really kind of feels like they forced it in there. There's also a subplot about them getting arrested towards the end of the movie, and it feels kind of pointless as well. It just, so much in this movie just feels like it's there to just add more filler, add more time to the storyline, and I just feel like it really is completely unnecessary to the film in general. And like I said, it uses a lot of the same stuff from the first movie again, and it's just kind of like, are we really doing this again? Like, can you really at least try to do something a little bit different? I mean, with Jay Roach, who directed this movie, he did Austin Powers' The Spy Shaggy, which is a good sequel. Maybe not as good as the original film, but at least they were trying to do something different with it. This just feels like they were recycling the same movie again, but it had the benefit of coming out over the holiday weekend, and it proved to be a massive hit, and hey, it's a comedy that still remains one of the highest grossing comedies of all time. Excuse me. But yeah, it's a movie that's just kind of like, it's fine for what it is. It's your typical comedy sequel. I would say it's one of the better ones because there's at least moments in here that I do. Most of the stuff I like in here is fine for what it is, which is more than I can say for most comedy sequels. But this, yeah, it's fine for what it is. Nothing too spectacular, nothing too amazing, and it certainly beats the crap out of the film that ends the series. But again, we will cross that pathway when we get to the end of the decade. But so yeah, that is Meet the Fockers. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, Kenan Thompson starring in Fat Albert. That's a bizarre trailer from the demon Fat Albert coming to you in the screen. to characters that are barely in the movie, if not in the movie in general. Like that girl in the shop, the one with the blue shirt on. You never see her in the movie, and you never get to see the junkyard in real life. And yeah, methinks that this movie was heavily reshot and re-edited before this actually came out. But Fat Albert, based off the popular television series of the same name, Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, which I highly recommend you check out. It's one of the best. It's one of my favorite TV shows. But yeah, you could see where the problem with the movies come into play here. But there's a lot of potential in a movie where there's a lot of potential for this. You had Bill Cosby, the show's creator behind the project. You had a director, Joel Zwick, who had just directed one of the biggest comedy hits of all time at that point, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Kenan Thompson, I think, is near perfect casting as Fat Albert, and you would think that this couldn't possibly fail, but then you remember this is the Fox era run by Tom Rothman. This is the guy that eventually gave us movies like Garfield, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Marmaduke, Fantastic Four, everything he did with Star Wars, a PG-13 version of Die Hard, a PG-13 Alien vs. Predator. Yeah, Tom Rothman did not make the best decisions in 2004 at Fox, but let's be honest, he's not making the best decisions in 2024 at Sony. I mean, did you see Harold and the Purple Crayon? But yeah, we're going to go deep into this one because it's one of those movies where you just have to hear from somebody who saw it to understand how bad it is. But, I mean, it starts off right from the get-go where it has this traditionally animated sequence, just like the TV show, where you have Fat Albert and the gang saying, "Gonna have a good time," which is great, except one problem. This movie, this is based off of a movie that was from a show that's notoriously known for not having great animation. Yeah, one of the rare times when commenting on how good the animation is actually a flaw against the movie. And yeah, Filmation, if you don't know, they were known for telling more in-depth and serious storylines than focusing on great animation. And figuring they could spend more money focusing on more topical storylines and recycling animation, the animation wasn't their priority, but more focus was set on the stories that they told. And it seems like they're doing quite the opposite here. The focus is more on the higher quality animation than an actual story is. As you can tell from the rest of the movie, where you have Doris Robertson, played by Kyla Pratt, who's a depressed teenager still recovering from the death of her grandfather, and she's ignoring her foster sister, played by Dania Ramirez, whose efforts to bring her a social life, and upon learning that her parents will be away for a 2-day business trip to the Poconos, which kind of a douchey way to tell them that, it's like it's presented in a way that's in that scene. You remember that scene from Jimmy Neutron where the aliens use notes that literally say, "We have gone to Florida for an extended vacation." We're sure that her parents were taken by aliens to be their chicken alien leader, right? So she essentially lets a tear hit a TV remote as Fat Albert is on TV land, which when the hell did that ever happen? But the tear opens up a portal between the cartoon world and the real world, and Fat Albert jumps out of the TV knowing she has a problem. And that scene in the trailer looks much better than it does in the movie, which again, is when Fat Albert comes to her world, it's horrifying to look at. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but also, Fat Albert apparently is able to figure out how tears can somehow magically open up portals to other worlds, and it's just one of those things that we'll never know. Just like those magic tears that the dolphins were able to talk to humans with and got in that Titanic movie that the Nostalgia Critic looked at. But then you have Rudy, Dumb Donald, Mushmouth Bucky, and Old Warrior Harold jumping out as well. Bill tells Russell to stay there, mostly because they couldn't find an actor to play him, even though they got Jeremy Suarez from the Bernie Mac show to play him in the voice role, and he only appears in this in the as an animated character. So it's a fish out of water story, pretty much. I'm not going to run down the whole story. I really don't want to run down the whole storyline here because we'd be here all day, but I kind of have to tell you how bad this movie really is. So, I'll tell you some of the things that really bug me about the movie. The gang tries to go back into their show, which ends up abruptly ending. It's like the show is ending at weird points in the day. Like as soon as something's about to happen, they're just like the biggest trolls out there. And then they have these jokes, like there's this bit involving pop cans, which I was born in 1989, so I don't know how pop cans were like back then, but I'm pretty sure you could still use the pop cans like we use today. But these guys are so fascinated about how pop cans work in the modern times. It's like, that's really the one thing you're going to think is so amazing here. But like I said, they go into the living room just as the show was ending. Like, TV Land's the biggest troll in the whole movie because it just happens at the stupidest points in the whole movie. And so they follow Doris to school, which is weird because the movie begins with her at school and then she just goes home and then just comes back to school. Like, I did that once when I was in high school. I got in trouble for it, and yeah, I don't think you'd be able to do that. You'd be able to do that here, but apparently in this movie you can, but they're amazed by the new technology. Like I said, pop cans, cell phones, laptops, pointless Jeff Garlin and Aaron Carter cameos, and also one of the guys from Good Charlotte, too. And yeah, it's a fish out of water story, and there are times when the lines can be very amusing. There are the times when the lines can actually be funny. And then they have a subplot where Alfred falls in love with Laurie, and then you have this sort of the antagonist in here, a bully, Reggie, who is an annoying schoolmate who has an obsessive crush on both Laurie and apparently Doris too, and challenges Albert to a track race that Albert wins. And then there's another attempt to help Doris, and then the gang essentially persuades these cheerleaders to invite them to this outdoor party, and they essentially say yeah. So yeah, no conflict there. And so they decide to go to a shopping mall, and the absurdity here really gets ridiculous because they show up at the mall and they're just awestruck, like they've never been to a mall before in the 1970s. You know, it's not like Dawn of the Dead came out in the 1970s. Oh wait, they did. You know where that took place at? A mall. So yeah, the filmmakers are not really using their brains for this, unfortunately. And there are, again, some interesting ideas. Like there's an idea that, you know, as much as the characters are still in the real world, they start to fade out a little bit, but they also get act a little bit different. Like there's a thing where Mushmouth can now speak normally, and Don Donald goes to the library and takes off his hat, and he's got a face, you know. And it's never really explained, but at least they're trying something different overall. But they never explain. It's only with a certain amount of characters, though. They never explain why Albert's not changing, Bill's not changing, Bucky or Rudy are. They're fading, but they're not. Their personalities aren't really changing either. So they essentially go back to the TV, and once again, breaking news interrupts the show, and it's just like, which, keep in mind, this is TV Land, a network for a cable channel for sitcoms and dramas. How is there breaking news on TV Land? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If there was like an emergency alert system, then maybe this could work, but no, it just doesn't work that way. And of course, Albert wants to stay with Laurie and help Doris with a problem, and Bill's the only one who's being the smart one and say, we have to go back to our world because we're not gonna be able to exist anymore. So there is a little bit of an existential crisis here as well. I really don't like the way they portray Albert in the movie, because in the TV show, I mean, he's nothing like this. In this movie, they treat Fat Albert like he's selfish and lovelorn once he meets somebody he's got it bad for, and goes against the complete idea of the character altogether. Compare that to the cartoons, where he always help out other people by giving advice to people and making decisions to help and sometimes save others. Sometimes it didn't even work. There was one episode where, you know, there was a gun battle, and, you know, one of their friends dies. Not one of the main gang, but one of the friends that they know dies, and that's literally how the episode ends. So, like, yeah, even when he's trying to do the best he can, he can't always win in the end. And yeah, it doesn't work out because those moments don't work out, but they make him more of a human and realistic character than anything that this movie gives him credit for. So, as they continue on here, Fat Albert literally meets his maker in Bill Cosby, and insert as many, you know, jokes about Bill Cosby as you want to, because why not? I mean, Nostalgia Critic did a lot of that when he reviewed this movie earlier in the year. And again, this is where the movie should get interesting, because you have the creator meeting his own creation. It sounds like an interesting setup, and what they come up with is so stupid. Cosby basically tells him that the character is based on Doris's grandfather, the one who passed away at the beginning of the movie, which explains Doris's confusion over why Fat Albert seems so familiar to her. Cosby basically tells him to return to the cartoon world, or he will turn to celluloid dust. And they do kind of create this emotional storyline out of this scenario, but it's so hammy and cheesy, and it's not even the most cheesiest thing they do in the movie that tries to tug at your heartstrings. We'll get to that at the end. But of course, we got to have the big misunderstanding cliche, you know, and they do it here with Albert and Laurie telling him he has to leave, and she thinks he's being insensitive. It's just like, no, he's literally going to be killed if he doesn't get back in the television, which everybody else does except for him, because he has to go back to helping Dory out. And with the way that this movie has been going, given how the TV schedule works in this world, I wouldn't have been surprised if they cut to the O.J. Simpson trial, because that's just how the world works here. And so yeah, he goes to the marathon to cheer her on, and Doris wins, and Reggie, being the asshole that he is, attempts to threaten Albert, and not even threaten Albert, he's just like, he just screams out, "Hey everybody, look, it's Fat Albert," even though nobody nobody in this world apparently knows who Fat Albert is except for one kid before he meets Cosby. And it's just like, why are you in Fat Albert? Why aren't you in Fat Albert in the TV show right now? It's just like, this is a little white kid too. This isn't like a black kid or anything. This is like a little white kid. Like, keep in mind, this is 2004. This isn't something that's on when Fat Albert is seen everywhere and everyone knows who he is. Like, the levels of ridiculousness that this movie goes to is insane. And, like, Reggie's plan does not make any sense whatsoever. He's literally an attention whore. He reminds me of Taye Diggs in Equilibrium. Like, in Equilibrium, Taye Diggs is the character where he plays it over the top. He gloats over the fact that he caught Christian Bale crying and that, you know, he's feeling, and let me just go ahead and eat up all the scenery that I can. Like, he's a shallow villain and an attention whore, and Fat Albert just scoots him off like a fly, and, like, that's the end of that storyline. And so, after a really ridiculous skateboarding sequence, because this was 2004, and, you know, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was still a thing, supposedly, but yeah, so they eventually get back into television, and it recuts to the episode they were in beforehand, so I guess there's only 3 episodes that TV Land has available to them, I guess, but, yeah, so they give the lesson, and you think it's all over, and then the stupidest, most sappiest, most ridiculous, emotionally manipulative part of the movie comes in play, where Cosby and his friends, who were in his routines and then were characters of the show, stand in front of the old friend Albert Robertson's grave. As the camera pans on each of the men, images of their counterparts are seen. Doris watches them. The old men race away as if still kids at heart. The same kids from the TV show that helped Bill Cosby inspired. My God, you cannot come up with something more forced and more Hallmark Channel-esque than they do here. And I get it. Tie it back into the old routines, but there's got to be a better way to do it than this manipulative Lifetime Channel, Collateral Beauty, Xfinity Christmas ad level of emotional bullshit. You're only doing this to get a cheap tear out of the audience, and that's like there's a message to the whole thing. The only message this movie is giving you is that Fat Albert is a beloved franchise that we just want to destroy because we're 20th Century Fox. Cough up the cash. That's really the best way to describe this movie in general. It's a disappointment, and a bad disappointment. You've got the creator right there. He should tell you how the character should act, but no, the movie just feels like a cash grab and a bad one. They waste so much potential with the movie. They try to update the animation, and it goes against everything that the show stood for. They try to do the fish out of water story, and it fails miserably. They try to go for the cheapest, most manipulous way to get an emotion out of you, and it fails miserably. It's a movie that's a massive failure and a huge disservice to the show itself. You're better off just watching the original cartoons. It still holds up. The movie does not, and it's just one of those examples of 20th Century Fox taking yet another beloved franchise and just ruining it. Plain and simple, just avoid it like the plague. Granted, it's better than Garfield or the Alvin and the Chipmunks sequels, but that really is not saying a whole lot. That's like saying I found $20 in a steaming pile of garbage. I had to dig all the way through it, but I found $20. Are you really satisfied with yourself? I certainly don't think so. But, so that's 13 minutes of your time wasted talking about this. Let's talk about another movie that's a waste of time, Darkness. Now, why would you release this on Christmas Day? Oh, wait. I know the reason why, because this is a movie that was actually shot in 2002 and was sitting on the shelf at Miramax Films for 2 years, and then they decided, you know what? Fuck it. Put it in theaters on Christmas Day. I guess it wasn't a bad mistake, because it did end up becoming a hit. Made like 3 times back its budget, but do you remember this movie? Because I sure as hell don't. I do remember that apparently last time I talked about this on the Coming Up thing last time around, I said it was produced by Wes Craven, and no, this is not produced by Wes Craven, unfortunately. I mean, it would not have surprised me if it actually was, but no, it wasn't. But you do have Anna Paquin in here. It's a movie that, stop me if you've heard this before. It follows an American family who moves into a house in the Spanish countryside where 6 children disappear during an occult ritual 40 years before. The teenage daughter and young son of the father are subjected to increasing disturbances in the house. Amityville Horror, The Grudge, Poltergeist. Yeah, I think all that's in here. And, yeah, the movie is not great either. And you can tell why it was sitting on a shelf for 2 years. Like, I don't even understand how the hell this made the money that it did. I mean, it's a movie that really, really just feels like a film that has nothing of value to it whatsoever. It's a boring movie. The scares are not interesting. You know, the taglines in that trailer alone are some of the most ridiculous, are some of the most cliched riddled lines you can use in this movie here. I mean, it's ridiculously lazy too, and it's just like there's even elements of child abuse in here which don't make a whole lot of sense in here in general. Like, how does that even? It's trying to have a statement about child abuse, and it's just like, this is not the type of movie to be doing that with. And even then, it's just like there's nothing of value to this movie whatsoever. There's atmosphere in here. There's tension that could maybe work if you had an interesting storyline to work with here, but unfortunately, there's just nothing of value to it. I think everybody who's completely wasted. Nothing of value happens in here. Just a bad movie. Just a really, really bad movie. So yeah, Darkness. Quite frankly, we don't know how it became a hit, but it did. So on to the next movie, and that is Joel Schumacher's adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera. And that is all I can show you from the trailer, because I ain't getting copyright blocked for that. Now watch me get a copyright strike for, not even a copyright strike, but a copyright notice for something else in this video. But I'm certainly not going to show you the full trailer then, unfortunately, because that trailer, most of it is music from the show itself. I don't think I need to tell you what the story of The Phantom of the Opera is, but if you don't know it, it begins when an opera ghost terrorizes the cast and crew of the French opera house while tutoring a chorus girl. He finally drives the lead soprano crazy, and so she and her friend leave. The girl is able to sing lead one night, but the soprano doesn't want her show to stolen, so she comes back. The ghost demands that they keep giving his protege lead roles. Meanwhile, his pupil falls in love with the Vicomte de Chanay, but the Phantom is in love with Christine, her student. The Phantom being played by Gerard Butler, and Christine played by Emmy Rossum from The Day After Tomorrow. The Phantom is outraged by their love and kidnaps Christine to be his eternal bride, while the Vicomte be able to stop the dastardly plan. And this version is actually the second version we've looked at on this show. We looked at the Robert Englund version in 1989, which is definitely going for more of the horror aspect of it, but this is more straight in line with the Andrew Lloyd Webber version of it. And it gets kind of a bad rap, but honestly, I've seen worse. I've seen Les Miserables. I've seen a lot of these musicals that are not as strong as they should be, but this is just, it's passable. I mean, really, there's nothing really bad about it, per se. The visuals, I think, are very good. The acting overall, I think, is very good. I like Gerard Butler as the Phantom. Emmy Rossum and Patrick Wilson are very good in here, too. You've got Miranda Richardson, Minnie Driver, Kieran Hines. Sometimes the music can be really good. I like Gerard Butler's version of the song from the trailer. The singing here is not the greatest overall, but I liked his version of the Phantom song from the trailer there. If you watch the trailer, you can tell what I'm talking about. But most of the songs themselves are just okay. The writing and direction's a little bit off, though, and they add some stuff that are devoid from the stage version of the show that feels kind of unnecessary to add into it. And it's not a perfect adaptation by any means necessary. It's a movie that, like, I really don't know what the best version of the storyline really could be. I mean, the Robert Englund version is a fun version just to see, Freddy Krueger do a version of the storyline here. I'm trying to see if there's any other versions of here that... Phantom of the Paradise, maybe, but then again, it's been a while since I've seen that one. But other than that, though, it's, like I said, it's not a bad version of the story. There have been much worse versions of the storyline. There have been much worse musicals that are similar to this. Like I said, Les Miserables, I think, is worse when it comes to their singing. That's not really there. Mamma Mia is another example where the singing by the actors isn't really that good. This is about good enough to say that it's a passable attempt. At least in my opinion, it's a passable attempt. But who knows? I might be the only one that thinks that. But I think it's fine for what it is. Nothing too spectacular, nothing too amazing, but just fine for what it is overall. So, not much more to say about the Phantom of the Opera. Let's go ahead and move on to the last movie we have here, which is Don Cheadle in Hotel Rwanda. The better Don Cheadle movie to come out in December 2004, besides Ocean's 12. But in this movie, you have Don Cheadle and Sofia Okonedo as hoteler Paul, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Paul Rusesabagina and his wife Tatiana, based on the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, which occurred during the spring of 1994. It documents Paul's efforts to save the lives of his family and more than 1,000 other refugees by providing them with a shelter in the besieged Hotel des Mille Collines. Hotel Rwanda explores genocide, political corruption, and the repercussions of violence. So, kind of similar to Schindler's List in a way, except this one takes place, obviously, in Rwanda instead of, Holocaust Germany. But it's a pretty good movie. It's a really good film. I think introduced people to Don Cheadle as a serious actor overall. I think the acting overall is very good. Joaquin Phoenix has a good role in here. So does Nick Nolte. The story overall is very good. It's a very intense film. The emotional moments, I think, work very well here in general. And like I said, it's really focusing on Don Cheadle as the main focus of why the movie works so well, because it's a movie that shows that, hey, this guy has a lot of serious acting chops that could benefit him in the near future. And he's been starring in movies since then that have shown what a great actor he can really be. I mean, he's very good in the film. He plays the role very well. This director, Terry George, does a very good job of handling the script for this as well. He also would later go on to do Reservation Road, which was alright for what it was, but I think this is overall his strongest film in general. A really good film overall. Not much more to say about this one, but it's definitely one that, if you like stuff like Schindler's List or like some criminally underrated works like Cry Freedom with Denzel Washington and Tim Robbins. It was Tim Robbins, right? Or am I thinking of somebody else? Hold on, let me just double check here, because I'm pretty sure it's Kevin Kline. I'm sorry, it's Kevin Kline. I think Tim Robbins was in a movie that was similar to this, Catch a Fire, which came out a couple years later, but yeah, Cry Freedom is definitely a movie that reminds me of this film a lot. Hotel Rwanda, a really good movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. So with that said, we'll wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. I'll save the 2004 Leftovers episode for the next episode, because we do have 2 more movies that'll basically come out on the last day of 2004 that we'll talk about, including The Whites' In Good Company with Dennis Quaid, Topher Grace, and Scarlett Johansson, and A Love Song for Bobby Long with Scarlett Johansson and John Travolta. So we'll take a look at those movies. Those will be the movies that will wrap up 2004 in general, but we'll have the 2004 Leftovers on the next episode, because there's only one big new release for that weekend. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So, with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time. And until then, as always, take care.